drainage issues to recreation to infrastructure, those are some of the issues that Mount Pleasant Town Councilman Howard Chapman is working on. I talked one-on-one with him about those issues and whether or not he'll seek re-election for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Mount Pleasant Councilman Howard Chapman, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you very much, Quintin. Appreciate the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, the last time I spoke with you, obviously you were in the beginning stages of your career, obviously, as Mount Pleasant Councilman.
Correct.
I know that you're going to finish up your first term coming up soon.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you, as we sit here right now, Mr. Howard, are you going to seek re-election?
Well, I'm looking at the possibility. I haven't made up my mind, but as long as the good Lord gives me the health, I believe I can go forward.
In going forward, what are those issues right now that would actually keep you on council for the next 4 years?
Well, there are several issues that we're working on council. First and foremost, as you may know, we passed a referendum regarding parks and playgrounds for everyone in Mount Pleasant. It was a close election, but I felt very strong that our children needed, for the future, parks and playgrounds that right now are overcrowded, and in many cases, children have to go to Daniel Island, have to go to Somerville, have to go to North Charleston to be able to practice or play their games. Also, parks are very important to the entire community, and this referendum has parks in it too. So I want to follow through with that, get the parks and playgrounds built. Another key issue for me is drainage. We've been lucky to be able to get the Royal Avenue drainage area almost finished, and then we have another drainage issue that I believe has been funded with not only federal funds but some funds in our budget to go forward with the Edwards Basin in Mount Pleasant. So those are two big drainage issues that we have, and I'll help get started, and I want to see those through. Third, and to me, just as important to all of these, is getting attainable housing for everyone to be able to live in Mount Pleasant. Our teachers, our firemen, our policemen, our hospitality workers cannot live in Mount Pleasant because it's too expensive. We've got people working for the town of Mount Pleasant, for example, in the recreation department that live in Monk's Corner. How long are they going to be able to drive all the way from Monk's Corner to work in Mount Pleasant? I would suggest not very much longer. So in order to have teachers that can teach the children in Mount Pleasant, we need to have attainable housing for the teachers. We need to have attainable housing for our police and firemen. Because if we don't have that, then they're going to be working in other communities, and we're going to have a difficult time finding policemen, firemen, teachers, hospitality workers that want to work in Mount Pleasant.
Now, how many of those town employees right now live outside of the town limits?
Many. I don't have the exact number, but I can tell you many. We've had discussions with the school district. One of the assistant principals at Wando lives in North Charleston. We've got another teacher at Wando that lives on James Island. And that's just an example. There are many, many more. But if I was a teacher and had the opportunity to teach James Island High School instead of Wando and didn't have to drive every day an hour, I'd probably do that. So it's critical for Mount Pleasant to get attainable housing. And I was very pleased to see the General Assembly change the law for expenditures, what's called tax money,
Right.
to help us use some of that possibly. And I don't know that I can convince everybody that that's the right thing to do. It's certainly a better opportunity today than we had before the legislature made that change.
I want to get back to that in just a second about attainable housing, but you talked earlier about the parks, Mr. Chapman, Councilman Chapman.
Yes, sir.
How many of those parks currently in Mount Pleasant are overcrowded?
Well, I would say pretty much all of them are overcrowded. We had, for over a year before this referendum, parents coming to us every council meeting explaining to us what I already said. Their children don't have places to play because the ability to schedule different parks and playgrounds is not available when we need it.
And as we sit here right now, Councilman, how many parks in Mount Pleasant are actually overcrowded as we sit here?
Well, I would say pretty much all of them, as told to us by the parents and the children who actually came to our meetings for over a year when we were looking at the potential for this referendum. Now, I can tell you that we're building, already under construction, some new soccer fields and baseball field in the area of Carolina Park, relatively close to Oceanside High School.
Right.
They're already under construction, but those are just part of what we need, and that's why that we were so anxious to get that referendum passed, which it is, and we're already under design with play fields for the kids to play on.
So you talk about those play fields, Councilman. Let me ask you, have you all put the RFP out for that?
I don't know that the design is totally complete, but we've talked about the possibility of having it ready to go in late summer.
Wow.
So that's, I mean, we're working hard to get the design done. Once the design's done, it'll be able to go out. Now, there are some other projects like the gymnasium that's going to be part of the rifle range park.
Sure.
Might take a little longer. But designing a soccer field isn't going to take that long. Same true for some baseball fields. Same true for pickleball courts, which are also part of it. And you know, pickleball courts are for adults, but there's also younger kids that are playing pickleball now. So I look at what Isle of Palms did recently on their play fields, and you've got kids in their teens and adults to the age of 70 years old or 80 playing on those pickleball courts. So that would be a good use of land for us.
Yes, sir. So who exactly is the designer for all of these play fields?
I can't answer that because it was an RFP that went out, and I actually don't know the name of the firm, but I know Leolio and Associates has some of the work that we've given, and I believe that they're doing the Rifle Range Road Park, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
I know they're one of the firms that we've selected to do the design, and they're local, and they're very good.
Now, I know the 5-year reassessment for property taxes is coming up again. The average viewers who's watching this right now, property value and corresponding property taxes and the government's revenue are going to increase likely by the maximum 15% allowed by law. Can you all just let the 15% fund the desired 10%?
Say that again?
Yeah. Obviously, the 5-year reassessment for property taxes is coming up again, and the average viewer who's watching right now, property value and corresponding property taxes and the government's revenue will actually increase likely to the maximum of 15% allowed by the law. So can the town of Mount Pleasant just let this be 15% fund, actually fund the desired 10%?
Well, I think what has to happen is there is a rollback required.
Yeah.
And that rollback that's required will determine what the actual percentage is. So until that amount is put forward and our finance people look at what the rollback is, I can't give you an answer to that.
Does council have an ideal rollback amount that they would like to see?
Well, certainly the ideal rollback is back to zero, but it's based on the laws that exist. It's based on the requirement to upgrade the prices of housing for not only Mount Pleasant, but also Charleston County, because that's who does the actual assessment of the property. So depending on how that goes, we'll take a look at it. Our finance people will take a look at it, and I can assure you be within the law, and it's whatever the law allows us to do, that's what we'll do.
So what can the law allow you to do right now?
Well, the law allows us to go back to where we can have a reasonable increase, but not overload the taxpayer.
Now, I know on
And again,
yes,
our finance people would put that together for us to look at.
and I know on a $500,000 to $600,000 home, it's approximately $70,000 to $80,000 a year with a sunset clause. Does this all go away after 15 years?
It doesn't. I think what you're talking about is the referendum that we passed, which was 15 years. The referendum was for a period of 15 years. Once that 15 years is up, that's done. That's different from the property tax reassessment that's done every 5 years. That's a completely different animal, so to speak.
Now, with this property tax increase, will home insurance rates in the town actually increase as well?
Well, what? I didn't.
Yeah, with this property tax increase, will home insurance rates in the town of Mount Pleasant actually increase?
I think it depends on your insurer, what they feel. Normally, insurance is based on what it will cost the insurance company to put you back whole again, to allow you to put your house back the way it was before any damages. That's what insurance is all about.
Right.
So it will let you go back to your house as long as the amount you pay is to do that. The individual makes that determination when they buy insurance. And the insurer can only do what you pay for.
That's it. So there will obviously be property reassessments for what years when this bond is expected to be retired, right?
Correct.
And so does the town of Mount Pleasant's ordinance say when the tax hike actually expires?
Yeah, the tax hike expires 15 years from the date that it passed.
And when you go back to that referendum back in November, Councilman, do you think the referendum was poorly rewarded on the ballot?
No, I don't. And I say I don't because our lawyers looked at it and we put together a wording that we knew could stand the test of time. I happen to have participated in a previous referendum where the wording on that referendum was subject to questioning and eventually went to the state Supreme Court and was overturned. And that had to do with Carter. We passed a referendum for Carter in 2000, I want to say in 2002.
Right.
And when that referendum passed, we thought, we're ready to go. Well, there were people who questioned that, people who first of all, didn't want public transportation to begin with, but people who felt that the wording wasn't good for a public referendum. They happened to have won their stance. They won in the state Supreme Court, and we had to start all over and we weren't able to have a passed referendum for Carter until 2004.
Right.
But it was because the language at the time was not what the courts felt was reasonable. Language we had was very specific about what people were going to get if it passed.
Now, in that referendum, it basically asks, do you want to spend $50 million on recreation facilities? But nowhere does it actually mention property taxes or a 10% increase. So if you could go back, how would you rewrite that?
Well, I think in terms of the value, what was in the referendum actually had wording talking about what parks, what playgrounds, and that was in what people voted for.
So, say for instance, a $500,000 assessment of a home today, Mr. Howard.
Yes, sir.
If it hits, say, the 15% max each time, wouldn't that be like over $600,000, $760,000 over time, going say to 2035?
I'm not sure I'm following your logic. It will be approximately 80 for a 500,000 home, about $80 per home per year.
Would taxes add up a lot more?
Well, when you say will taxes add up, there are two separate issues. One is the value that you have to pay for the referendum.
Sure.
That does not increase your assessed value. Your assessed value is determined by Charleston County.
Right.
Charleston County makes that decision. And every 5 years, they look at it. But today, a $500,000 house has approximate increase of about $80 per home.
Now, would that include the added taxes on cars and boats?
Well, cars and boats are a separate issue.
Okay.
It's a separate issue. Will they increase? Yes.
Okay.
They will increase, but again, it's that percentage.
It's Charleston County.
Right.
Now, I know the referendum says the income from the tax hike can be used for ongoing maintenance and operations of facilities. What are the ongoing maintenance and operations of facilities in the town of Mount Pleasant right now?
Well, when you ask that question, you're talking about somebody has to make the fields ready to go every day. Somebody has to mow the grass. Somebody has to line the fields. Somebody has to put up the goals for soccer.
Sure.
Somebody has to put up, the different lining for a soccer field versus, say, a lacrosse field.
Yeah.
Same thing as for a baseball field. So all of that's included.
Now, I know that the referendum also states that the maintenance and operations will never end in the town of Mount Pleasant. Is that true?
We're never what?
Will never end.
Well, when you say never end, we've got to maintain the fields once we get them built, just like we do today.
Now, can you tell me what the plans are to upgrade the actual pools, not locker rooms and offices, because that means nothing to the actual swimmer, but the amount of money planned on being allocated from the possible tax levy?
Well, I know that in particular, one of the pools, which I believe is in not Carolina Park, but Park West,
Oh, yes.
needs to be improved. There will be some improvements. I don't know all the details, but there are improvements at both those places scheduled.
Now, is the town only able to collect the money that's owed to pay off the bonds?
When you say only able to collect, yes.
Okay.
We can't increase the value of collections from, say, that $80 per year on the $500,000. That's all we can collect. Now, does that mean in terms of our budget, can our budget not make sure that we are doing what we have to do to maintain our equipment, to be able to make other charges that, for example, for drainage?
Oh, yes.
We're already doing drainage.
Yeah.
There are things we have to do, pipes,
Oh, yes.
contractors,
Sure.
and all that. We're going to be doing.
Yeah.
We also have work that'll be started on the Billy Swales
Oh, yes.
Parkway extension.
Yeah.
And that should be started either late this year or early next year. The design's underway, and it should be completed and ready to let for bids either late this year or early next year. So that's another thing that I'm anxious to see through.
Now, what would the town of Mount Pleasant actually do to do with the excess money they'll be actually collecting?
Well, I don't know that there's any excess money. When you say that, we're going to be building the parks and playgrounds. And as far as extra money, I hope that we have enough from the proceeds from the referendum to do everything we want to do. We did our best to estimate what those costs are, but you never know from day to day how the economy is going to let us do that. We're going to do the best we can. We've done the best we can to estimate what those costs are, and hopefully we had enough in terms of expectations of what the economy will do, that we'll be able to do everything we said. But we can only expend that amount that the voters allowed us to spend.
You talk about the economy, Councilman. Then why ask for a referendum in the middle of inflation?
Well, let's put it this way.
Okay.
There is never a good time to go out and raise taxes. Never. But in the economy that we were in the conditions we were in, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. It's not going to get that much better. So the point is, we felt, 7 out of 9 people felt that this was the best time to do it.
Now, going back obviously to those pools that you mentioned earlier, is there a plan to fix and update the town-owned pools with all their new tax, obviously?
Well, those are all town-owned pools. Those are all town-owned pools. So the answer, I guess, is yes. We will be making improvements to them, as has been provided to us by the public.
Now, by doing this actual referendum, Councilman, would raising taxes hurt the segment of the population who can actually at least afford it?
Well, when you say those that can least afford it, it's an amount that is, we felt, reasonable.
Okay.
And I say reasonable for everybody. The public, if they don't have places to play, their children don't have places to play, they have to go out and find and pay for other places. And if the children don't have places to play, they find other things to do that we probably would prefer they not be doing. They need to have the opportunity that children for many years have had in Mount Pleasant, and that is to have places to play so that they can be completely active in the right way.
Yes. And so now that this referendum has passed, isn't this the largest municipal tax hike in recent history?
I can't answer that. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. When you say the largest one in reasonable history, for whom? First of all, it's $80 on a $500,000 house in a year. I think there's been some reassessments that have occurred where it was raised more than that. So I can't answer your question, but I can, from a reasonableness point, say that I would believe that there were some reassessments that raised taxes even more than that.
And how many times did that occur?
Well, I don't know the answer, but I remember when the law was changed in South Carolina, because we were having problems in Charleston, we were having problems on Sullivan's Island, problems in Isle of Palms, and other places where residents who had lived there for many years were seeing their properties taxed out from under them. And that's why the law was changed. I believe it was changed back in the late 80s or early 90s. And when that happened, it allowed people who have lived in their houses for many years be able to stay in them as long as they wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. So what is the annual percentage increase in the operating millage rate?
It depends on each year's budget. There is no annual amount. There is an amount which allows us to have a reasonable budget. The answer to your question about the amount of increase is this year we passed a budget without a tax increase other than what was agreed upon by the voters in a narrow vote, but a 51%, 49% referendum. So only that amount is the increase, no other amount. Everything else is flat.
Now, how many more mills are currently available for tax increases after the required rollback after the 5-year assessment?
I can't answer that. Our finance people would have to answer that question.
Now, is there enough bank millage that could easily exist in 15 years to allow, say, 4 mills to continue after the bond is actually retired?
I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think anybody does, depending on what happens with the economy.
So does the recreation impact fees, or does those actually improve infrastructure and not tax on residents' homes?
Well, when you say the recreation impact fees, the recreation impact fees that are received from building new houses and like businesses, that goes toward new recreation programs. We haven't been able to do everything we needed to do and has been requested by the public with the $50 million referendum. We can only do what we told the voters we would use that money for. So there are other projects in what's called our CIP.
Sure.
And in that CIP, those projects have the ability to draw down some of the recreation impact fees to be able to be built. But that's the best I can answer that question.
So how many of those projects are actually in the works right now?
Well, when you say in the works, they're in what's called the CIP, but there's only one or two, and I can't remember exactly which ones.
Okay.
Other than what we're doing with the referendum, sure, that are going to be done this year in the budget.
Yes,
there are others that are part of our needed projects that have scored well in our CIP grading, but we don't have enough money to really start those projects.
So what are those needed projects in the CIP that actually need money now?
I don't have it in front of me. If I had the book in front of me, I could tell you. But there are 10 or 15 projects that have been designated, but don't have enough money to get them finished.
So what is the game plan for that to get more money?
Well, the game plan for that is that we need to look at each year. We need to look at which projects are the highest rated, which ones we don't have enough impact fees to go forward with, and make a financial decision as part of the budget and move them forward.
Which one has the highest rates now?
Without having the book in front of me,
sorry.
I can't answer that question.
No worries. Let me turn over to housing. You just talked earlier about the need for
attainable housing. Yes, sir.
Attainable housing in Mount Pleasant. So where exactly is it?
Well, we have to make, I guess, informed decisions about where to place it. We're going to be working with the county. The county is really pushing that as well. Excuse me. and make the decisions that the public thinks is the right thing to do. We've got, I think it's 11 or 12 nodes throughout the town that could be used for attainable housing. Now, whether they're the right ones each time, I don't know. But that is probably where, if we get sufficient funds and work with private industry, that's been something that I have been really pushing, to work with the Home Builders Association, to work with the Metro Chamber of Commerce, to help have the funding to do it. And part of that is densities, sufficient density to be able to do it. Once those decisions are made, I would think that's going to go into the commercial nodes that have already been determined as part of our planning and comprehensive plan.
So where exactly and ideally could affordable housing be in the town?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yes,
those nodes that have been identified by the comprehensive plan, by the planning commission, and by the town. And those nodes are throughout the town.
Any on Coleman, or any in the Old Village, any in Park West?
There's some on off of 17. I don't think there are any on Coleman. I think there are several on 17 North. I think there are several on 41. So those are some of the places where those nodes are.
Okay, Mr. Councilman, let me ask you this then. What's more important for the town right now? Is it building new homes or in commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, and better utilizing those existing homes?
When you say the existing homes, it's all going to be determined where the traffic conditions warrant, where the available infrastructure is for that change in density, if you will. So we're going to have to look at all of that, and we're going to have to look at it with the amount of housing that's needed. I don't think we're going to be able to do all that we need. I think it's going to have to come in gradually, and it's going to have to be determined by where there's sufficient infrastructure and available space to do it within the confines of our zoning and our land planning.
Where's that infrastructure right now?
Well, that infrastructure is on, in most cases, where our arterial highways are. So that's probably where some of that is going to go.
Wow. Let me turn quickly to the fire department. I know that reportedly the fire department and some of the ladder trucks are out of service, and apparently fire trucks are out of service. The fire boat even went out on the day of the blessing of the fleet. And I know that many years ago, Mayor Will Haney stated that 40 out of 47 objectives for the fire department's strategic plan have not been met. What are the 7 that have not been met in your mind?
Well, I can't answer that only because we just had our last council meeting, and as part of the budget, made available to the fire department the ability to have spare ladder truck and spare pumper trucks on site, so that we wouldn't be in a position where we might have not enough equipment. We also have a program with the City of Charleston, with the City of North Charleston, with Isle of Palms, with Sullivan's Island, what's called excuse me, automatic aid. That automatic aid lets us have, and we participate in that ourselves, have additional equipment available to us in the event it's needed. And it automatically is sent out until our personnel call the dispatcher and stop it from coming. But that automatic aid is a great thing that we've negotiated with North Charleston, Isle Palm, Sullivan's Island, for both. For all the communities.
Sure.
It's good for North Charleston, just like it's good for Mount Pleasant. Good for Charleston, just like it is for Mount Pleasant. Same thing for Isle Palm, same thing for Southern Town. So, I think what I'm trying to say is, during our budget process this year, we've responded to all of the issues that came forth that you mentioned, and in a very positive way. And one of those was to go out and acquire some used equipment that will help us meet all of our needs.
And lastly, how many of those spare trucks do you all want to have available next?
Well, that's up to our fire chief, but I think we're looking at 2 or 3 of them make it available, and to the tune of somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000.
And then is that within the budget?
It's in the budget.
Okay.
It's in the budget.
Yes, sir. And I hope we get you back on Quintin's Close-Up soon so we can talk more about some of these issues. But for right now, Mount Pleasant Councilman Howard Chapman, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Quintin, it's great to be with you, and thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome.